Jain viewers, welcome to another episode of the Chanakya Dialogues English. On 8th of December, we lost General Bipin Rawat, Mrs. Rawat, and all the other 12 passengers in that Mi-17 helicopter that crashed near Wellington in Tamil Nadu. It was indeed a sad day for the country. Today, I have with me a very special guest. I have with me Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former GOC, 15 Corps, and currently Chancellor, Central University of Kashmir. And we are going to talk to him about who General Bipin Rawat was, why this national outpouring of grief, even from the common man, what are his memories of General Bipin Rawat, and also what is General Rawat's legacy. Sir, Jai Hind and a very warm welcome, sir.
Jai Hind to you. And may I say, Gaurav, I come to your program with an element of very, very deep regret today. I wish to express my condolences for the loss of these lives of the brave hearts, including the CDS and Mrs. Madhulika Rawat.
Absolutely, sir. So my first question is, sir, we saw this national outpouring of grief. And this was unprecedented because, sir, there's a photograph that I would like to show here. It's about a cobbler sitting on the sidewalk, sir. No shop, just a small little patch of cloth. He's sitting there on that piece of cloth and he's put this chair in front with General Rawat's photograph, sir. And, he's paying homage to the CDS. I'd like to understand from you why this happened, how it happened, and how did it percolate to the common man? Why this outpouring of grief? 99% of the people who were probably grieving for him never met him, sir. How did he manage to touch so many hearts?
A very good question and a very difficult one to answer, actually. But may I start by saying that General Bipin Rawat served in the 4-star rank, the longest that anyone has served in the Indian Armed Forces. He served 5 years. 3 years as the Army Chief, and he was supposed to be 3 years as the CDS. But very unfortunately, it was cut short by a year. So he served 5 years. Now, these 5 years have been very, very crucial years. If you really see, in these 5 years, the overall strategic confidence of the nation has gone up. The confidence that the nation actually has in the armed forces of the country has also gone up by volumes. General Rawat's own legacy, his 5-year contribution, and the fact that he was never hesitant to speak his mind. He was ever ready to take on the media, be with the media at any time. So he was a very, very visible face. Well, our past experience was we had great chiefs. We never had a CDS. We had great heads of these services. But media was not something which was so alive in those days. In the last couple of years, media has really come of age in India. All kinds of media, social media, the normal print media, the electronic media. And it's through this that General Rawat was communicating. He was not one of those clam-up chiefs. He was one who really communicated. And he communicated with his heart. You see, he really saying, I mentioned it somewhere in my writings, he was never afraid of even creating a controversy. Very rarely do you find someone in uniform who steps out, goes across the Lakshman Rekha to make some statements which may rock the boat. But General Rawat didn't seem to appear to have any hesitation in doing that. So while doing all this, obviously in this electronic age, people were watching him. In this age of the media, people were reading him. Information was flowing all over. And then, of course, he was in this very crucial appointment, which the country had never seen before, the Chief of the Defence Staff, the super chief, so to say, in standing behind the Prime Minister at most functions and places like that, in the pecking order, very, very high in the pecking order of power, the power people who are actually powerful in the country. So with all this, that the people started looking at him with a very kindly eye, and an eye which primarily sort of kind of associated him to be a general who was with the people. And I won't be surprised if he's given this title much more often in the future. The People's General, leaving behind a legacy among the people, and that's primarily because the reason. I'm told in Uttarakhand there was a complete voluntary lockdown in the whole state. People who were traveling there told me that they asked them what has happened, and they all, in fact, they really didn't know the full thing of it. They said, well, the army has lost its chief minister. Now, that was also in a very humorous kind of a thing also, but they didn't know who really Bipin Rawat was. They obviously knew he headed the army. But it is in a very, very kindly way that they remembered him. And like, as you said, the smallest kind of ways, a cobbler doing his regular work and putting a photograph of the general in front of him. These are the kind of gestures which are great to bring the armed forces far closer to the people. These are people's armed forces. And I think Bipin Rawat represented that extremely well.
So, you have served, sir, when he was there in the army, and I'm sure, sir, you must have met, you must have served in similar sectors, you must have served in similar areas, you must have worked together in the army, sir. Any personal memories that you would like to share with our viewers?
Absolutely, yes, Gaurav. The fact that we had a lot going in common, in the sense, I was 4 years his senior. And despite that, I always treated him as a younger brother. We were together for many, many years in different appointments. But the commonality starts from the fact that his father, he was from a military family. I am from a military family. His father was a general officer, so was my father. And he was commissioned into his father's unit, 511 Gurkha Rifles. I was commissioned into my father's unit, 4 Garhwal Rifles. So that was the commonality of our origins of stepping into the army. Well, I met him socially on and off here and there, not professionally for the first 20 years or so. But thereafter, we seem to have, in the last 20 years, 22 years or so, we had very deep associations. In the military secretary's branch, he was the Colonel MS. I was also a Colonel MS that time. And I still remember when I was posted out as the Uri Brigade commander, the military secretary, then General Mahesh Vij, asked me, since I was in a very crucial appointment, Colonel MS policy, he asked me, who should step into your shoes in this appointment? I had no hesitation to say, Bipin Rawat has been here for 1 year now. Why don't you try him and get him into this appointment? And he said, oh, that's a very good recommendation. And that's how Bipin stepped into my shoes in the next 2 years plus, 3 years almost. He was occupying that very crucial appointment of the Colonel MS policy. Then I landed up as the GOC in Baramulla. And what do I see next door? As Commander 5 Sector RR, in that very, very challenging environment of Sopore. Yes, sure. I find Bipin Rawat there. And of course, he came calling immediately on me, and we got together. We did many, many operations together. But catching Bipin Rawat was very difficult because he was always on the move. When I tried to catch him here and there to speak to him and tell him to come over, or if I went to his headquarters, I would invariably find that he's missing. He's conducting an operation somewhere, he's leading a reconnaissance somewhere, or something of the kind of dynamic energy that he was bringing to that environment. Sopore requires dynamism, as you are fully aware. Sure. Thereafter, of course, he went away to do the NDC. He went to the United Nations to command a brigade, same time as General Bajwa, almost the same time. They really didn't match, their tenures didn't really match. But he was there, and General Bajwa was also the commander of the Pakistani UN brigade. But on return, I was GOC 15 Corps. And, Kashmir was burning in 2010-11, early part of 11. And I had the choice to ask for a GOC for 19 Div in Baramulla. And I had no hesitation. I said, my God, if I've got this choice, I'll request for Bipin. So Bipin came as GOC, Baramulla division under me, and we worked for the next 1.5 years together. That was again an amazing experience because, you see, serving under your boss, who's already been the commander of a brigade in that same area, the GOC of the division in the same area, is not an easy thing. Because then your boss will expect everything to be done in his way. But Bipin was strong. Bipin stood up to me many times when I tried to tell him how to do a thing, and he always said, "Sir, can I come back with an alternative?" And Bipin came back with alternatives. That's why I always say he did far better in the appointment of Colonel MS policy than I did. He did far better as GOC-19 did than I ever did. And that is where our relationship really gelled together. Our wives got to know each other. Mrs. Madhulika Rawat was one of the gentlest souls that you can ever find. I mean, it's a pleasure just to meet her, speak a few words to her, and it calmed you immediately. She was such a calming personality. That is the amazing. That's the memory I carry of her and of Bipin, of course, the warm handshake and the fact that we met, well, just 10 days before this terrible incident. We met on the 28th of November in a wedding. And he, in fact, asked me, he said, why are you wearing ethnic wear today, sir? We've never seen you wearing kurta pajama in a wedding. And I told him, I've got a problem of an ingrowing toenail. So he said, oh, sir, I've got the same problem, but I don't find time to ever get it operated. So I said, did you get it in Uri or in Baramulla? He said, exactly. So that's the place where I got it. So I said, that's where I also got it. So we have got it like something which we are carrying from the good old Kashmir days. So it was, that light-hearted banter with Bipin was a usual thing wherever I went. But the last point on this is very often at 7:30 in the morning, a call would come from the exchange and he would say, sir, so-and-so, are you General Hasnan? I said, yes. He said, sir, the CDS will speak to you. Before that, the army chief will speak to you. I said, go ahead. And he would come online and say, sir, I'm sorry, sir, before you push off for something, one of your activities, can you tell me a few things? And then he would start off. We would talk about Kashmir. We would talk a little bit about the Chinese front and things like that. Doklam time, I remember particularly these calls coming to me. So he was one who was never afraid to consult. That's the quality of a general. The man who says, I know everything will never succeed. The man who says, I know a lot, but there are people around me who also know as much. Let me try and consult them. That is the point. That was the kind of thing which Bipin Rawat actually left behind. This legacy of his is all about that.
Sir, I also have a thing that I'd like to share, sir. And the thing that came out, I met him several times, sir. Several times, 6 or 7 times I've had the honor and privilege of meeting him and shaking his hand. But one thing which came out very evidently was that he was very kind even to people who were decades his junior. And somebody asked me that, I said, he's the army chief. And at that time he was the army chief, sir. And I said, he's the army chief, sitting army chief. And I'm a one-time company commander. But, that very warm, firm handshake, sir. And that hand on the back kisses, or how are you? And said, it did not feel that you were talking to this, chief of this massive army, Indian army chief. It felt that you were talking to a senior who was very considerate, very kind, very generous. And that is how we always came across, sir. So I also have little but very fond memories, however little they may be, sir. Very fond memories. My next question to you, sir, is, this entire thing about jointness. That was one of the charters of the office of the CDS, sir. One of the charters was the jointness, theatre commands. Now, initially, there was a lot of hesitation in all the 3 services, which is natural. So people had their own army, navy and air force in the sense of operations and administration, etc. And General Rawats, I think what the government had requested from him and what the initial charter was, and even today the charter is that get everybody on a similar war-fighting platform and an administrative platform, whether it is capital asset acquisition, whether it is other matters. Get everybody on a similar platform so it can be a more efficient method of war fighting, efficient method of purchase, efficient method of, that entire Q thing, Q and A both, sir. That there should be efficiency in both the A matters and the Q matters, etc. In a wider perspective, if I may say. What are your views about that? So this initial hesitation and then acceptance.
See, Gaurav, we are, if you notice, we are just around the time of the Vijay Divas, the golden Vijay Divas. And the last couple of days, we've been talking about the famous victory over Pakistan and Bangladesh in East Pakistan. And we are also talking a lot about the jointness of those days. There was a jointness, there's no doubt about it. The 3 chiefs did get along quite well in those days. Of course, the preponderance of operations was conducted by the army, and the navy and the air force was in the background. But there was jointness. But things have changed since then drastically. In between, midway in those 50 years, came the Gulf War, the Gulf Wars, and you saw the role of the Air Force shock and awe, the whole doctrine of shock and awe which came about. You've seen how maritime power now is stepping in to make such a huge difference to the strategic issues concerning the entire Indo-Pacific. So obviously the Navy and the Air Force have come into their own as far as their domains are concerned. Technologies have also enhanced in such a huge way. It's not just about land borders. The threats are no longer just about land borders. There's no doubt we have had an obsession about the threat from the west. Now a threat from the north. Both times it is the land borders that we are looking at. And may I say, our adversaries would love to keep us completely engaged at the land borders because they feel that they've got a great advantage at the land borders, not looking at the fact that it's the maritime domain in which they actually are completely on the defensive. So having said all this, this realization has been going on for fairly long, that there is a need for integration. You cannot have at the operational strategic level a field army on its own, a virtual theater of the Air Force, a command of the Air Force on its own, dishing out resources to 2, 3, 4 different commands of the army, the Navy on its own completely. Now, this kind of a thing cannot, very correctly identified by you, it's not just a question of operations, it's the question of logistics. It's the question of acquisitions. It's the question of training. It's the question of doctrine. So many things, because we were living in domains of our own. Everything was developing. Well, it was developing, but they were all developing in the form of pillars, verticals, and nothing else. This is the last place in today's world where you require a vertical. You require everything to be horizontal, to be mixing with each other, merging with each other. And this, of course, 1986, the Goldwater-Nichols Act in the United States, it had to be thrust down upon the 4 armed forces of the United States. We didn't want something like that to happen, perhaps in India. The 3 services did realize it, and I think the intellectual warrior community of India, the veteran community of India also gave support to this kind of a thing, that in today's world, you need to be integrated. It fell upon General Bipin Rawat to be the first chief of the defense staff. And no one can complain on this because the government went beyond its call. In fact, it even gave him the Department of Military Affairs, the DMA. If you remember, there was a major complaint that the armed forces always have, that we do not have an integration at the headquarter level. We require uniformed personnel to be also sitting in positions alongside their civil counterparts in the Ministry of Defense. Well, the government gave it to you, and they gave you powers more than you were expected. I remember the day that CDS was created and the Department of Military Affairs was created, alongside the staff officers who were posted, everyone was flummoxed. They had no idea that so many powers are going to come their way suddenly, and how are they going to deal with it, right? But to his credit, to his very great credit, 3 years as the army chief, and 3 years of the army chief through difficult times, through the times of Doklam, for example, which was a serious challenge at that particular time. Kashmir, at the time when Balakot happened, Pulwama happened, Kashmir at the time when the 5th of August decisions were taken, all this helped him tremendously. It helped him, no doubt. But then when he reached his position, the first thing which he was very demonstratively doing was to show that he no longer was wearing the army lanyard. I think he first of all took off his Gurkha hat, which was, I think, symbolically a very, very good thing. Or a lot of people criticized him for putting on his own ranks and his own, badges and things like that. These are things which can be wished away. What was important was that he took off the Gurkha hat and put on a normal peak cap and a badge on that to say, see, I'm going to view everything dispassionately. I'm going to view the interests of all the 3 services quite dispassionately. Well, there may have been an odd issue here and there with the Air Force, etc. But by and large, you can't say that Bipin Rawat in any way was favoring any of the 3 services. I think he was going absolutely perfectly in the middle path, favoring just nobody, and looking at the issues, looking at all the issues. He was, as I said earlier, completely open to suggestions. I went and interviewed him for a magazine. That magazine wanted, in fact, that magazine approached him and said that we want to bring a very senior officer, a veteran, to interview you. So he said, why don't you get General Atta Hassanan? So I was honored. I went there and we sat for 3.5 hours in his office and he spoke about the future. Everything came out in that particular, and I suggested to him there. I said, why don't you do a little more ideation, absorbing of ideas from different walks of life, from different people. So he immediately took that suggestion, and within 15 days, we had a lunch in his house in which we selectively invited certain people, and we looked at the AD command, for example. We said, if the Air Defense Command is to come up in the near future, what are the challenges? Let's look at it from a 360-degree angle. So everyone contributed. We had people from the Air Force coming there. We had from the Navy. We had people from the Air Defense. Everyone came, and I sat there and we all took notes. And I thought it was a wonderful way forward. This is something we would have done much more often. Had he been alive, we would have done this much more often in the near future, probably for every theater. If there are 4 theaters coming up, we would have done this probably for every theater. So I think the manner in which he set course the Department of Military Affairs and set course the whole institution of the CDS was just right. He was learning. He was learning on the job. There is no doubt that no one in this country knew how to do this job. He was learning on the job. But what he left behind is a great legacy which just has to be carried forward.
So my last question to you, sir, is now what is the way forward, sir? Obviously, he's institutionalized, General Bipin Rawat institutionalized quite a lot of things. So there will be another CDS. And what will be the challenges? When I say way forward, sir, I mean what are going to be the challenges for the new CDS? What immediately, sir? 6 months, 1 year, the new CDS, whenever he's appointed, what's he going to be looking at, sir?
Firstly, Gaurav, it's unimportant as to who is the CDS, right? Sure. I think that message should go clearly from our show. That who is the CDS is immaterial. It can be someone wearing white, someone wearing blue, someone wearing the olive green, right? It has to be the person who's most suited for that appointment. And one of the most important characteristics, traits for that appointment is a large heart. You cannot be niggardly. You cannot say my service. You cannot say me, myself. No, this is not the kind of attitude. And that's something which Bipin Rawat has left behind, actually. A great attitude in this appointment. The biggest challenges are obviously the correct identification of the threats. We can go horribly wrong in this entire thing. We need to be very, very balanced in our analysis of what the future threats are. It's not just as I already mentioned, it's not just the land borders. But even if you look at the land borders, you cannot get obsessed only with the northern borders. There is a shift taking place from the western borders to the northern borders, no doubt. But we must remember that the western environment, the domain towards the west, which you take it from Pakistan, Afghanistan, stretching to Iran, Turkey, the Middle East, if you look at Central Asian republics too, this entire region is still in turmoil. The Americans are leaving it behind in turmoil because they feel that there's a great priority towards the Indo-Pacific, where the very, very unfriendly rise of China is taking place. And therefore, with the American hand away, the American shadow away from this area, they having left for the Indo-Pacific, this area is going to be in the churn in the future. The threats are going to once again come back from here. The kind of ideological threats that have remained long in this area will once again start impinging on India. And you've seen what's happening in Afghanistan. Therefore, I think we would be very wrong if we did not continue maintaining the focus that we have been maintaining on the Western Front. But at the same time, switching gaze to the Northern Front, which we have done, keeping both the fronts going is one of the biggest challenges. Who is therefore to get the priority? For example, the Northern Front is a huge front, right? From Ladakh to Arunachal. Is this going to be divided out? Is this going to be divided out theater-wise? It is going to be divided out. You see, ultimately making theater boundaries is going to be a huge, huge challenge by itself. Because lots of people are saying that the ambit of control should be such that you are capable of the gaze should be possible in that area. Keeping it too wide with too many resources under one hand may not really meet the needs of the time. So this is one aspect. The other aspect is the maritime zone. One of the biggest challenges will be we want to be a large navy. We want to have a large, effective navy, a 200-ship navy. We want to have a third aircraft carrier and things like that. But where are the resources? The pie is still the same. Ultimately, the Air Force is vying for high quality aircraft, which are very, very expensive. You've seen how the deal with 36 aircraft, we had to spend so much of money. And we are now seeing that we are going for relatively lower generation aircraft with the Russians comparatively to cater for numbers, because we had to come back to being at least a 42, 43 squadron Air Force. Now, therefore, the Air Force's budget, the Navy's budget is going to hugely impinge on the overall pie that is available to the three armed forces. The Army is crying hoarse about the infrastructure on the northern borders. We have been working on this infrastructure now for the last 20 years. It's still not delivered. It's still not sufficient. The expanse is just too large. The resources required is just too big. We require some additional troops. Perhaps there's a need of redeployment from the west to the north. These are some of the huge challenges which are going to come about. The acquisition process, you cannot allow a situation where a major piece of equipment takes 20 years for delivery. You have to make sure that 3 to 4 years down the line, what you are looking for has been acquired and is in the hands of the troops for particular use. So these are some of the huge challenges besides the aspect of joint training, which the three services have to do, the aspect of creating the joint culture. And may I say, it's not just a question of jointness between the armed forces. It's also the question of civil-military relationship. It's a question of enhancing the quality of thinking among the political community and overall enhancing the strategic culture of India. All this is a part of the CDS and his organization, their responsibility. And this is no small responsibility. Whoever wears the badges of rank or the hat of the CDS in the very near future, I don't envy him, frankly saying. It's a job which will require 24/7, 365-day commitment, which is what one expects from an appointment at that stage of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, sir. It was indeed a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you and understand all the things that you said. Ladies and gentlemen, with Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, viewers, he spoke about the legacy of General Bipin Rawat, CDS. He also spoke about how, his memories where they have served together. Also, the General told us about, the office of the CDS, what it does, what are the challenges, and what jointness is all about. What are the history and how the future looks like. Thank you, all of you, for joining us for this very interesting episode. I'll see you again next week with another guest. Till then, from my team and I here at the studios, Jai Hind. Jai Hind, friends, you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like, subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon.